Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us live here on the Customer Driven Leader podcast, where we explore the critical role that leaders have in creating and sustaining winning cultures that positively impact customer experiences. I'm your host, Dr. James Killian. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for the XM Global Collaborative for sponsoring this event. And thanks for the couple of you who have decided to actually join us live on the webinar. So I expect to hear some Q&A when we get towards the end of the session. So I'm super excited to introduce my next guest, Mr. Bart Fanelli. He's the CEO and co-founder of a fantastic company called Skillibrium. Keep an eye out for them. He's a seasoned go-to-market leader with over 25 years in tech and is best known for helping to scale a little company called Splunk. You might have heard of them. From around a tiny little $60 million to a much more impressive $1.5 billion, and also driving growth at OutSystems from 100 million to 300 million X, so 3X growth there. So Bart's also co-author of the Success Cadence, which I definitely want to hear more about, Bart. And he's an executive advisor focused on building predictable, high-performing revenue organizations through alignment, discipline, and scalable operating rhythms. And Bart and I always have amazing conversations, so I'm sure that this one is going to be not so different. So Bart, thanks for being on with me this morning.
Thank you. I always, such a glorious intro. I appreciate it. Hard fought battles along all of those for sure.
Always, my friend. Well, and we're going to talk about that too, because, you and I were introduced through a couple of mutual friends. Shout out to Tony Olivier and Jack Welch on introducing us there. And we just hit it off pretty much instantly because very like-minded philosophy. So you talk about those hard-fought battles, and I want to get into that for sure because I think what you and I have discussed is that those leaders who are fighting those battles today have never been under more stress and pressure. I would even argue a state of duress as compared to how they are today. And I really see that particularly impact go-to-market leaders, so sales leaders and sales teams. And so really eager to hear your thoughts about this. But as you know, as we had our prep session, I have bookends. I have something I always start with and something I always finish with. And so the thing that we'll start with here is the question I ask everybody, and that is: a leader, team, or company is customer-driven when what? Can you please finish that sentence for us?
When everybody's communicating and aligned for the same desired outcome. That's it.
Wow, that's the most succinct response that I've ever heard, and I love that. I do think alignment and communication, it really is back to fundamentals in a lot of ways right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've all been through. I think those that have been in career a long time, there's varying cycles. And it is by far now coming full circle to people and fundamentals, only because tech is somewhat not commoditized, but it's easier to build and do with tech and AI. So it's back to the human. We have to have teams that are willing and able to go run the business in a particular way. Otherwise, we fall in the trap. It's chaos. It's somewhat entropic. It just does its own thing. And it doesn't scale that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I had this really interesting conversation with one of these genius product leader types out of Stanford, one of these guys working for Meta who was, making like $4 million a year. I mean, so he was doing all right for himself, right? And he says, yeah, James, I'm out. Tech is done. It's dead. And he's telling this story about how he's going to buy a indoor sand volleyball pit with a bar and a restaurant, and that's going to be his retirement strategy because the tech world is dead. Now, I think that's a pretty extreme kind of a position. I don't think the tech world is dead per se, no. But I do think that the point being, to your point that you just made, the tech industry has become a bit commoditized because you look at the speed of which a novice can actually create a truly functional product in a matter of hours to days as opposed to months. And so I do think it comes back to who are the people who are positioning or marketing or selling, delivering or servicing that. And that comes right back to go to market and teams, right?
Yeah, I hear it from a lot of peers and those that I collaborate with. It's hard. Like many are exhausted because of the cycle within tech. It swings so aggressively,
Hmm.
and the volleyball and bar indoor pit and all that's phenomenal. He obviously has had a great run, clearly, but some of us still have a passion for continuing to figure out the complexities of this, and the easiest fallback, or what, not the easiest, the most predictable, is as long as we can align people and teams, even with the chaos of um, uh, tech moving at light speed and apps being built in like no time flat, to your point. It
Hmm.
comes back to, are the people operating within something that is repeatable, defensible, representation of a brand? Can they actually do the job the way it's designed? And otherwise, it's a free for all. And some companies, that's okay, small, super high growth. But there's a massive middle where there's these SaaS companies that have over rotated either on hiring or are trying to become more efficient. They have imbalanced performance. All the tech in the world will not help them. It comes back to change management and people, and building teams that can execute the way that the business needs them to execute. So for me, that's a sweet spot, and it's almost like a full circle moment. So it works. Like, we're okay with that.
Yeah, I love that. And I was thinking too, sidebar here, you're talking about some of these tech companies that hire too fast. And, as you know, I had a long history of leading a business unit at IBM and then divested that to Qualtrics and then was over there for a number of years. And it was a great run. But they've had a rough go of it. And you look at what's happened to Medallia just recently as well, which I wrote an article on that is pretty scathing in terms of them getting handed over their creditors. And it's a rough space, right? But I think about what you just said about hiring too fast and then that pendulum, that whipsaw that tends to happen within that industry. And I think the tipping point, for at the time that I was at Qualtrics, was there was this a big bet or a power metric that came out, and it was I believe is we will be a 7,500 person organization by 2027. And at the
Wow.
time that came out, I even thought that's not a smart metric. Why are we saying that? Why do we want to be that? And almost instantaneously, what everyone saw happen was the hiring standards got relaxed. So
Yeah.
what used to be very hard to get in the door with 18 interviews, now all of a sudden it was like, oh, I know a guy and he can fog a
Uh,
mirror. So let's
Fire them
bring him
all.
in. And that's never worked, right? And so
No.
then you see what happened down the road was, oops, we hired too fast. We got to let everybody go. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
happens.
so the way I process that, that's the lagging, like that's a lagging indicator, or you're putting some target that's arbitrary way out there, and there's about a million things you got to do to make that successfully attainable, and the number is irrelevant. It doesn't, like, what, I don't even understand how you can put a head capacity number out there. There's nothing relative about, or merit. There's no merit around it. The other would be, hey, we want 10,000 customers as an example.
Mhm.
We're going for 10,000 customers. Okay, can we even service the customers we have today? And the answer is no, usually. And or can we make the 1,000 employees that we have and go to market successful, and define exactly how they do their job professionally today? No. Then why can we hire 7,500? Like, we can't. So those are wrong. That's just the wrong paradigm, thinking about it the wrong way as an executive, and it's somewhat pervasive. It still exists, by the way, and
Yeah.
so it just tells me that there's a place for everybody, whether you're right or you're wrong in the way you approach it. Kind of doesn't matter. We know those big statements end up failing, but they still, some board member, some investor, somebody still falls for that bullshit, and I don't get it. So it's back to who's accountable. Well, the investors and the executives are the ones that should be held accountable. But guess who ends up suffering the most? It's, those that are on the ground running the business that were hired incorrectly or, not given what they need to be successful. No development, no professional coaching,
Yeah.
no operating model that's repeatable. It's just win at all costs. So I think we're going to face the music on that again in the world of AI. But at the same time, we got to calibrate and try to help those companies that are moving in a more pragmatic way.
Yeah, I think that's very eloquently put. And to your point, when you see this, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of shoot for the stars and land on the moon. So I love having like a Jim Collins BHAG, big hairy audacious goal.
Oh yeah,
My wife and I call it BSHAG's big scary hairy audacious goal,
yeah, yeah,
and I'm a big fan of those. But you got to be smart with what's the target that you're actually shooting for, and those arbitrary numbers. To your point, 7,500 employees or 10,000 customers. It's often the associate on the front line that's left holding the bag and
yeah,
delivering a subpar experience. And
yeah.
so, first of all, I would just like to say, thank you for saying that's bullshit. So we're going to get raw on this one and drop a
Yeah,
few four-letter words, which I love. So that dovetails into like my next question for you, because I like to personalize these things a little bit just for context, because yes, we're all leaders, right? But we're also all consumers. And as consumers, we've all had to deal with that bullshit that comes from the frontline associate who probably actually deep down in their hearts wanted to deliver a better experience to us, but they were hamstrung, or
yeah,
they didn't know what to do, or they didn't have the authority to make a call. And that leaves a very big gap in experience management. And so, can you think personally about an example from your own experience, as a personal experience, where you had a good example of a bad example of an experience like that?
there's so many. I'll use it. I'll give you. I'll use something relative in our industry. We all buy software. Executives buy software. That's what they do. So usually we're terrible buyers, especially if we're sellers. We don't like to be sold to. And if you're an existing customer, and now we're going to corner off all of the self-service AI that obviously doesn't need a lot of hand holding. There's still SaaS software out there. It is a pervasive big market. And when you buy SaaS software, you're being serviced by a client team, whether it starts with SDR, BDR, an AE, a customer success person, or solutions engineer. So the worst experience for me is every time you engage someone different, you start over. Like
Oh,
that is, to me, like I ask them if they're out of their fucking minds. Are you out of your mind? I've been a customer and I have been writing checks to you and your company, and you are asking me how you can help me. You should know. You have the telemetry, you know the relationship, all of the sales execution steps that the company has gone through to serve me. I've written you checks. Why are you asking me? And that sets me off inevitably. And that's the premise. That's the majority of companies that are out there, because that big middle, the big SaaS, all this, whether it's private equity owned or standalone SaaS, they still exist. They are not going away for a decade. Like there will be change, but
yeah.
they still have to service their client base, and they still have to post growth and EBITDA. You only do it by serving the customer base you have exceptionally well. And that has to be driven through leadership. It can't be just left to the people on the other side of the phone, or on, answering the call or doing the Zoom. You got to know them, you got to build a relationship with them, and they have to take you through the experience. So anytime, and I won't name companies, anybody asks me, I pay money to and I'm a customer of, I literally snap. It's an involuntary response. Are you out of your effing mind? Like, it's almost like, hey, can you hire more salespeople? Hire as many salespeople as you can. I was in a boardroom one time. I'm going to go full circle on us. First investor, first board meeting. How many quota carriers can you hire? Dumb question. Dumbest question you can ask
Yeah.
some.
How long is a piece of string?
Yeah,
Oh.
it's like, I have no idea. I need to go figure that out. And, in that particular situation, it's, hey, I'm taking 20% out and the numbers won't change. And I'll tell you about that next quarter when I come back. Sure enough, that worked. And so less capacity, same productivity, cost out the bottom line. Company starts to grow and scale after you model leadership to hire the right way. Well, those are the teams on the other side that when you get on the phone with them, oh, they know everything about you. They know where you are in the journey with their software. They know exactly what problems they're solving, and they know exactly who to involve without you asking.
Yeah.
Well, that's called service, and
Yeah.
that's the service that I think all of the SaaS companies out there in the world today are being challenged to deliver. Because if
Yeah.
they don't, they're going to churn.
Oh yeah. Well, not even just SaaS companies. I mean, you find it everywhere. I mean, look what happened to Spirit Airlines. Yikes,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's an extreme example, but just personally, just as late last night, actually, before I shut the lights out, I recently ordered 4 clothing items from a new clothing company that I hadn't before, but I like the look of their stuff. Thank you, Instagram, for bombarding me every 6 seconds, right? And I decided to pull the trigger and order some of the stuff. They had some good specials, and I ordered 4 items, and 3 of them I really like, and one of them just didn't quite fit right. No big deal, right? And so I decided that I would like to return it or exchange it. And they have their own 30-day exchange policy, which explicitly states from the day, the time that you receive it, you have 30 days to exchange or return. And I decided I wanted to exercise that option within a matter of 5 days. And I now have had no fewer than a dozen email exchanges with this service, and it is absolutely insane, Bart, because they're saying things like, we're going to give you a 20% discount if you want to keep the item. No, I'd like to exchange it. Okay, we're going to give you a 30% discount if you like to keep the
They'd
item.
rather not take
I'd
it
like
back.
to exchange it, and then finally they say, well, yes, okay, we can exchange it for a different item. You'll have to ship it back to this address at your own expense. And I was just like, okay. To your point, snapping, right? Like, what the F is the matter with you? And I finally just said, I do this for a living and you're not very good at it. And I've already spent more time than the $45 shirt is worth on this. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw it away. And you just lost a future customer. And I actually finished up the email with, just out of curiosity, are you an AI bot or a real person?
Yeah, there you go. So the unfortunate truth is in those models, sometimes I think that by design they'll make that statement. They're not going to exchange it because it's too expensive to exchange it. They'd rather you just throw it away and keep it because they're caught. They've already sunk cost into it. So it's a shame. Now the crazy thing is they'll probably still be successful as a company because they'll race themselves out of it and try to grow to offset, the dissatisfaction. And they'll fake some.
Yeah, but how do you do that if you're just going to churn customers because you're going to irritate them? I mean,
I think it's a race to the bottom.
hmm.
Or maybe it's a race maybe for them, it's a race to a certain threshold of revenue so that they can get bought by someone that will fix them. Who knows? All kinds of crazy strategies out there.
True. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about growth and go to market and leading in this crazy environment that we're in right now. So the growth that you saw when you and your team were at Splunk was just super impressive. Tell us more about that, and from your experience in leading that kind of growth, and what you're taking from those key learnings and experiences, and really applying
Yeah.
it to your own customers at Skillibrium. Talk to us about things that leaders need to be thinking about in terms of driving growth, but maybe aren't focused on the right thing. We've touched on that a little bit. Can you say more?
Yeah. Yeah. Less is more is the
Hmm.
point. So, you know, there was a group of very aligned executives at Splunk that they understood what it took to scale a company. So it was a wonderful shared experience where early in the company's existence, they hired senior executives that had done the job before, meaning professionally designed, implemented, and scaled an operating model that was predictable. And I got the chance to be a part of that and build many of the frameworks associated with it. And it all came down to when you define a model and you're hiring and training and ramping teams to support that model. If they choose not to support that model, then you can't support them.
Mm.
It comes right back to people. So you have to have the model defined. Everybody has to be continuously reminded of the model. And then you have to make sure you select the right team through your process to ramp them and coach them to run the model on repeat. And if they won't, and you've given them everything, then that's considered a low will or an unwilling, non-coachable person. You have to take the proper steps, but you have to either give them a chance. Well, you do give them a chance to recover, but you have to remove them. Otherwise, they will drag the company, the culture, and the growth opportunity down. So we were very disciplined at doing that. And even better, we did not hire at all costs in
Mm.
advance. So we actually slow rolled the entire process where we only hired when people were highly successful in mass. So I think in the early days for the first 5 years, we had over 80% of the field organization overperforming. And that
Wow.
because we intentionally did, it was called the success model. We intentionally did not overassign quota, very limited based on ramp and attrition on projected attrition. And then we maintained that aggressively, meaning you only hire when the team that you have is all they're all overperforming and busting at the seams. And
Mm.
then you layer in where selectively in real time. And we maintained that growth trajectory until we had critical mass. And I guess Jeffrey Moore and others call it escape velocity. It worked, right? So that was a learning experience where truth in advertising, truth in design, truth in hiring, and leadership coaching and development was all maintained aggressively through skill and will, through a 4-box coaching process. And we were removing people at boot camp if they didn't show that they were committed to the cause and following the way we designed it. We would do a 4-box review and remove them before they left their probationary period. Seems aggressive, but not if you're running a business that you want to grow predictably. And after all, you are hiring them and paying them, so there's a mutual relationship there. They should be committed to the job. So
Yeah.
we learned all that in real time over the course of about 7 years. And then everybody kind of rolled off and did their own thing. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure. 80% overachieving. I mean, that, traditionally you see about, roughly about 30% of reps actually
Yeah.
hitting their number on average, which that's just an astounding statistic. So you've touched a bit on this in what you just described, Bart, but given that you are kind of chipping away at what it is that Skillibrium actually does, can you maybe just give the 60-second pitch here on what it is that y'all do?
Yeah, very, very simply, when you think about go to market and you think about SaaS, that those companies that are out there that need alignment to serve their customers well and consistently. Well, they have to rally around a core set of skills and workflows that are learned and then you have to coach to reinforce those. And if you center all of that effort and energy on the leadership team, then you hold a level of accountability that translates from the senior executive to the contributor. And Skillibrium does that through a 4-box coaching model, matching workflows, and then matching curriculums that are usually unique to each of the customers we serve. And that is a revenue operating model that's repeatable. We instantiate it, and then we guide them to run their business based on it. And it proves out every time that if you're intentional with your leadership, not blanket training your people and then expecting results, but you focus on your leadership as the development, as the agent of change, then you get sticky and predictable results. That's what we do.
And I love that so much, and I just wanted that for the benefit of everybody else, because you and I have had these conversations. But as I look at kind of back full circle to some of the things that we started talking about, unprecedented times, right? I mean, we used to talk about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The iteration on that is now BANI, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. And it feels like that is just increasing at an exponential pace, frankly. I mean, the number of comments from senior executives now, when you get vulnerable with them and they say, I just don't know. I don't know anything. I can't make decisions I'm in a vacuum.
It's crazy.
It is super crazy, but I think, given all that, it's one of these situations where you have to assess the situation and adapt and overcome. And, I mentioned, I recently was speaking at the Work Human Conference in Orlando on the topic of what I'm referring to as work experience, not employee experience, which is still very, very important. So is employee engagement, but those are all lagging indicators. You use that term, lagging indicator. It's all about, hey, how was your onboarding? How was that training? How was your anniversary date? How were the ever 364 days this year, Bart? Right? I mean, well, let me think about that. That's not subject to bias at all or recency effect at all, right? So if you think about work experience, with the 5 pillars that we've identified, and those being the importance of culture and specifically microculture, how things get done within your unit, right, as a first step. Accountability, the criticality of modern collaboration, systems integration, and how do you onboard reps, leaders, part-time fractional gig contract consultants, and even AI agents in this crazy age to actually be able to set everybody up to be successful. And one of the things that I really love about what you and the team at Skillibrium are doing is, I use this phrase frequently and with intention, create the conditions for success. And I love that that's what you all are doing over there. It's not measuring how did that thing go, and then you go, oh, that sucked, actually. Instead, it's creating the conditions. I mean, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you have to. So all the great companies that are out there, they actually, the biggest example would be Apple. Like if you know employees that work at Apple, it is extremely precise. And everybody knows exactly what their role is, and nobody deviates from that. And they're proud of that. And that's an extreme example. But any company can create the condition, and the condition has to be defined and designed for every employee, whether it's a 10-person company, a 100-person company, or a few thousand people. The cycle is the cycle from onboarding to offboarding. The conditions have to be defined, and everybody has to be held to a standard. If they're not, what's the point? What is the point? Then that means everybody has their own agency and they can do whatever they want. Well, if everybody's doing whatever they want, how is the customer being served? The customer's not being served. The people with agency are just doing whatever they want. The company's leadership owns the responsibility of setting the condition from onboarding from day one, employee onboarding and customer onboarding, all the way through to employee offboarding or lifetime customer value. And those are the things that can be predictable. They can be defined. They can be um, um, set in motion so that culture rallies around that. But it's a leadership choice. It's not up to the contributor. And whether you want to be a part of that type of journey or not is also a choice. Don't sign up for a company that has that level of structure and discipline. If you just want your own, go be your own entrepreneur then. So,
Yeah.
this is it's a matter of choices that will evolve over time. And those that are young in industry, they have to make these crazy choices where, hey, they're going to try to sign up for a high flying AI company where anything can happen. We don't know. And we already know that there is a high level of churn out there in AI right now, revenue
Oh, yeah.
churn. And it's masked by growth, and that's okay. So they can do that, or they can do a pragmatic, highly structured company that has all of this predefined and learn how to run a professional prospect or customer engagement cycle with professional leadership and in a professional operating model.
Yeah.
You can do either and succeed. You have choices. I'm a fan of the latter. I want
Yeah.
the defined, the predictable, and a way for me to learn and or teach people to be highly successful, and that's leadership, right?
Yeah, I love that. And in thinking about your example of everybody kind of like running on their own agency, wild cowboy, wild west kind of style, right? I mean, you can still find those kinds of cultures that do actually deliver a superior customer experience. But the problem is it's inconsistent at best because there isn't a standard or a system. There's no operating model for people to
Yeah.
work within to know what are their guidelines and parameters. And so, and that becomes really important. I was talking with somebody just recently who spent much of their career in the restaurant industry as a leader there. And he said this thing that really stuck with me. And he said, your brand is delivered at the table. And I
Yeah.
really love that because,
Interesting.
if you think about that, or you think about like a high end chain, like I don't know, like a Capital Grill or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or a Morton Steakhouse or something like that. You can go from city to city to city and still have a very top notch, very consistent experience because their brand is delivered to their table through consistency and an
Yeah.
operating model, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so the whole idea is that brand, they invest in that brand, they preserve that brand, they train around that brand, and the experience is consistent because of that. And that's a
Hmm.
choice.
Hmm.
Then there are other levels of brand and experience that are dollar or spend appropriate. So, the higher the brand, the better the experience, the more the cost. So we're willing to pay. Those are all things that are predefined in an operating model and a strategy, and you can't compromise that. So what would happen if they stopped training their people? What would happen if they stopped doing huddles, pre rush huddles as a team? What would happen if they didn't do collaboration and or promotion within their own organization? It would all deteriorate. The brand would suffer. People wouldn't go there anymore. That's so.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that is a function of culture, and that is and culture is a function of leadership.
Yeah.
And so back to leadership, this central thread that we've got here that we're talking about. As we think about this, you've said there should be no bullshit leadership, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about that, like say more about that a bit, and what would you say is maybe the biggest lie that go-to-market leaders are telling themselves in this wacky business operating environment right
Yeah.
now?
So can you hear me okay? Because we had a small blip.
Nope, I'm good. We're good. You're
Okay,
good.
I'm good too. I was catching up. I got the question. So the lie and no bullshit leadership, it's hypocrisy. I'm a big a trigger for me is hypocrisy. As a
Mm,
leader, you can't say one thing and then go do another. The only way leadership really works is if you set the example and hold true to the example that you want within your company. And that is every leader at every level. So it starts from the top. So the behavior of the most senior executive in any room at any given time sets the example for the culture, right? So as soon as that turns hypocritical, they say one thing on the all hands call, and then they're in a team, in a team briefing, and they're banging the table and acting
Oh my
completely
gosh.
different. It's over. They're full of shit. They
Yeah.
don't even understand. So the lie is that you can demand performance, or you can hire a head to make the number. Like those are just
Mm.
subtle lies that they show immaturity in executive leadership, that can't maintain consistency in an operating model and wait for the compounding results, which means they are not managing their board. They are not managing their executives. These are all things that people that are joining companies have to look for. And it is hard. There's no question about it. And the demands are hard. But if you're an executive leader, you have to have the pliability to manage your board and manage your investors, as well as lead your teams. So that's what elasticity in leadership is. You can't sign up for bad numbers. You can't commit to things that are unrealistic. 7,500 employees or 10,000 customers, 3 years. Those are dumb statements that should be red flags for investors and board members. That's bullshit leaders. That's bullshit. It doesn't work. But you can go slow and pragmatically and rebuild a culture and a company and be very balanced in your approach and not be hypocritical. And you will create followers, you will create brand, you will create industry. And that's the way to do it, in my view.
I
The older
agree with you.
you
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say,
Well, I
I
was just going to
completely
say,
agree with you.
yeah,
I completely agree with you. And yet
but it's hard.
it's hard. And so, like, why are leaders caving so fast today? And what should they be doing about it?
It's back to who you run with, right?
Mm.
I think the mentalities run together, and sometimes you determine it's not for you, and you create your own movement in a different direction.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I just think everybody has to be who they are, and those that are signing up have to follow what they believe in. That is a fit for them and their personal mission. And for me, it is a way better existence to live pure and transparent and run in a professional realm than scream at the scoreboard or bang the table or demand results. I just
Yeah,
don't. It just doesn't work, and it's
it doesn't.
punitive to industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the whole tech bro, toxic culture of the what do they call it, the hustle porn.
Yeah,
That stuff's
still
just gotta
exists.
go. I mean, yeah, you have to keep everybody motivated as a leader,
Yeah,
but you can do that at an individual level, things that are relevant to an individual, and form that one-on-one relationship to help with
yeah.
that. And yes, you have to rally the troops always, but do it in a way that's realistic and not ridiculous, right?
So think of it this way: there's how many layoffs, man? There are thousands of people
I've lost count.
on the
Yeah,
street
it's
that
crazy.
are highly qualified
Yeah.
and willing to run an operating model that is defined, willing to learn new things because they know how delicate industry is right now. Yet companies stay with what they have, don't up level their operating model or their leaders, and they demand performance, and that is a
Mhm.
red flag. It is a giant change management process that we are in, where pick the company that's going to define and help you succeed rather than it feels like it's the right bro culture, so to speak, which is fine. You can have a great culture, you can have a high performance culture, but it has to be done based on pragmatic decision making, skills development, and progression, and coaching and leadership with professional acumen. That's a better existence for all. And you just hope that's elastic from senior leader to contributor in all of the go-to-market functions. And if it's not, if I'm a senior leader, you're removing the people that are not doing it the right way. That's the way to do it. And then you get predictable scale over time. Otherwise, you're just going to churn in place.
Yeah, I
There aren't
agree.
that many leaders. And think of this. If you're a multi-billion-dollar company, and you have 100 leaders in go to market, you have to make 100 good choices.
Hmm.
That's not a lot if you think about it.
Hmm.
Over the lifespan of a company, you can get critical mass to follow an operating model. That's what leaders do. Well, if you can't, then you have a leadership issue at the top. It's a choice. It's all a choice.
It is. So. Tell us about your book, The Success Cadence, and how has some of what you're talking about here, how is that showcased in the book, and what are some other themes that we haven't covered that you think would be interesting for viewers, listeners to learn a little bit more about?
Yeah, it's all this. I like to call it. It's all the same, right? You
Mm.
have to be repetitive in order to be successful,
Mm.
uh, and it has to be simple and understandable so that it can be applied at scale. So the success cadence is the culmination of you have to have the right operational design and cadence. Um, and you have to have the right culture. And that means you have to measure your people objectively to do the job as designed. And we use a 4-box skill, will, or willing and able model. And that was spelled out in the book on how you bring a company from very early stage, from onboarding to offboarding their teams through a 4-box coaching framework at the most efficient intersection, which is leadership.
Mm.
It's the only
Mm.
way you can do it is have leadership following the same repeatable process and making sure the people that they hire adhere and or follow this process that we know works, that is designed for our culture and company. And if not, we have to determine if they're having some type of bad experience, a low will, they're not coachable. Maybe it's cultural, maybe it's personal. Give them a chance to work themselves out of that. If not, you have to gracefully part ways with them and hire someone that will. So we emulated all of the great work that we did over the years at both BMC Software and Splunk into this 4-box model in combination with Tom Schodorf, who was running revenue operations as the CRO at Splunk. He was also at BMC Software. And then Dave Mattson, who is the CEO at Sandler Training, he sponsored us writing the book together with us. And it was based on how you build a culture of performance through a 4-box model. And it works without
Mm.
question. We proved it works at scale at Splunk because we kept it simple. 5 core principles that we ran on repeat from onboarding to offboarding. They matched up with the daily cadence, the weekly cadence, the monthly cadence, and the quarterly cadence, and we all spoke the same language on the way we ran the business. And then we coached our people the same way. Well, that's the 4-box, that's the success cadence. And then we did it again. Went and did a fast growth, or I would say a late stage company that was starting to grow fast, $100 million company called OutSystems, where took them 17 years to get to 100 million. They got funding, came in, rebuilt the operating model, running the 4-box, running the success cadence essentially over 3 years, tripled revenue to north of 300 million in 3 years.
Boom. Nice.
And hard, but I think we said earlier, hard work, because it's hard people conversations constantly.
Yeah.
And most companies, most leaders are not equipped to have hard people conversations. They would rather exist and avoid those conversations. And when you do
No.
that, your performance suffers.
That's right. And and I'm a big fan of having, as I've said on the podcast, a variety of guests, like senior executives, practitioners of experience management, both customer experience and employee experience, psychologists. But I love having revenue leaders and go to market leaders on, because that's the most obvious place where the rubber meets the road. Is leadership equipping, enabling, empowering their teams to do the right things to be successful, and again create those conditions
Yeah.
for success. And sadly, what we know in the go to market space is a very pervasive problem, which is, oh man, Bart did 3x his quota, we got to make him the sales manager.
Oh man, but yeah,
Oh, it's
wrong,
so
wrong
bad.
move. Usually the wrong move, and in fact, they might not even want that. It's a reluctant move. So that's there's only usually in most companies a few of those folks, and they are the ones carrying the underperformers of everybody else. So
Yeah.
the thought is put them in leadership, and they'll go make everybody else do the same thing, and they have no understanding of building a team, but they do understand a certain way to get things done. So the right thing to do is to get in their head and unpack and pull them into the build to set the experience for everybody else rather than giving them a small team.
Yeah.
And so that we can understand what's working really well. A good friend of mine coined it, David Jenkins. He was the founder of Whiteboard Selling and the author of the book Whiteboard Selling. For the field, from the field. So that's when you get those that are doing it really well in a room, and you unpack everything. All right, let's line it up. What are you doing that's different? How can we make it so that everybody can have the tooling, the training, and the operating model that you are applying to make work without breaking the company?
Yeah.
That's where the lone wolf comes in and they break the company, and that's a bad cultural example. So instead of firing them, which is the hard thing to do, and instead of promoting them, which is the easy thing to do, you have to spend time with them and unpack them, and then create the conditions for repeatability through a
Yeah.
coaching model, and
Yeah.
then you build the company in that way, and,
Yeah.
and that's how it works. Easy to say, very hard to do. But if you want to build an enduring company, I don't know what other choice you have.
Yeah, I think that's right. And as I like to say, it's not hard. It is hard work, but it's
Oh,
not
it's hard
hard. I
work.
mean, you just have to make the decisions to go
You
and
just
do the work.
It's the commitment. Yeah, it's the commitment at every level in leadership, and then making sure you cannot have the tolerance for deviation, or
Oh,
um, we'll call it the bullshit leadership. They give you lip service, and then they go and do their own thing, or they completely they spend all of their time and energy trying to negotiate with you on why what we're doing as a company is wrong and what they want to do is right, and it's exhausting. So that's just someone that's not a cultural fit. That's all that is.
there you go. There you
Yeah.
go. Well, Bart, we're definitely on the back nine here, and about to start our initial descent on the end of the show here. But certainly want to encourage audience Q&A. Have a couple of questions for you here that we'll do kind of lightning round style.
Okay.
What breaks first when you try to scale from, say, 100 million to a billion? Is it strategy? Is it talent? Or is it leadership?
Oh, great question. So I'll separate talent from leadership.
Mm.
Talent breaks at the ground level because you usually overhire to race to your goal, and then you lose control of the quality. And therefore, what you're doing is you're teaching the leader the wrong behavior pattern for scaling a company. So it's very difficult to unwind that.
I appreciate that. All right, question number two. So, speaking of our friends in the Office of the Chief Revenue Officer, many CROs and sales leaders just absolutely obsess over a pipeline. Is there something that they should be obsessing about
Uh,
instead?
yeah, yeah. Pipeline is only as good as it being highly qualified and true and accurate. So you got to get way left of pipeline, and you have to obsess about the skill proficiency of those facing customers to align with the right problems to create qualified pipeline. Full stop. So that's where you spend all of your time and energy, and the rest compounds, and you get an evergreen customer buying and selling experience through your team. You can't chase pipeline, you chase quality interaction by defining it within your operating model, and that's how you scale.
God, I love that response. And it reminds me of one of my all-time favorite sales leaders that I ever had the privilege of working with, and he basically had a departure from the cultural norm. He kind of did a TO, everybody. TO, all right? Let's have a real meeting here as adults, and
Yeah,
I want the truth.
yeah,
Even if the truth is hard and brutal, and you're going to tell me that our pipeline is actually only a quarter of what we thought it was, that's the truth. And if we know the truth, we can actually manage that. We know
100%.
what the gap is and we can solve for it. And I thought that was just astounding for a sales leader to make a statement like that.
That's a professional leader right there. That's exactly, you have to find that and make it pervasive within your culture, and that's a hiring choice. And you have to find the root cause of the problem before you can go fast. So that's a wonderful thing. I would say less pipeline is more, as long as
Yeah,
it's qualified for the right reasons.
I
Um,
think you're right. I
and
think you're
then
right.
ratio, like, hey, we need 5x or we need 3x, based on what? Like, you're giving me, I have companies that pay for pipeline. You're out of your mind. Like, you're paying for the worst behavior in the world. Pipeline is a byproduct of highly pragmatic execution and collaboration between marketing, sales, and leadership running something repeatable. It is not an arbitrary number. And then you have to determine if it's qualified or not based on
Yeah,
very tight standards.
yeah.
Go slow and you will go fast. That's the idea.
Yeah, I love that. There's I think it's aviators, military aviators, naval, and the Blue Angels and such, and they say slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
I really like that. Okay,
Believe that.
so last rapid fire here. So we've talked about this before in the four box, the two by two. You say hire for will and coach for skill.
100%.
What does will actually look like as part of, say, a hiring process? Is that something you tease out as part of the interview, or how do you determine that to make the decision to bring somebody on board?
Great question. Hardest part of any leadership job is hiring.
Mhm.
Um, and you have to be able to recruit. If you can't recruit, think of it this way. If you can't recruit people to work for you, how are you going to recruit customers to buy from you?
Mm,
Think about that.
mm,
So recruiting is a leadership first principle. And um, when you're hiring for will, you have to test for coachability. Is the person, do they even have the level of empathy that they can self-reflect on their own failures, which is kind of the first step for being able to develop someone. If you have someone that's done everything right, they've been perfect through their entire career, and that's all they're sharing with you in your interview process, that's a red flag. So you get these variations in people in roles. So you're either hiring someone very junior. Can they really ramp fast and learn from our system designed to support scaling and ramping employees? Meaning, have we done that really well? If the answer is yes, we might take a chance on building that person up in a BDR SDR role for a SaaS company,
mhm.
then promoting them up through an AE ranks, and so on and so forth. Or if you're hiring a senior executive, can they narrate how they would take a junior person and bring them through that journey
Ooh,
themselves?
I like that.
Or are they just saying, I'm going to hire A players across the board because that's how we win? Well, you get a team of all A players with the same dominant personality and is self-destruction. It
Yes.
doesn't work. You
No.
have to figure the balance out. So the hiring process, you can do um, the type of dynamic questioning and hiring that helps you uncover whether or not they're the right fit. And there has to be a group that agrees on hiring. You can't just make the choice by yourself. Like, you
Yeah.
have to have people you define the profile, you define the system for hiring, and everybody has to be aligned to that, and that helps you maintain the level of culture and performance and coachability that you need to scale a company.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The best companies that I've worked with or for have all had a policy of rigorous interviews and 100% agreement that it's a go forward. And that way nobody can sit back and say at a later date, I didn't really think that he had the right stuff.
Yeah,
Everybody's got to weigh in. So
yeah, absolutely.
so as we land the plane here in the next couple of minutes, Bart, so, I finish, we start with what is a customer-driven leader. We finish with, what I like to call two things, which you can assume like a stop, start, and continue. So if you had one piece of advice for practitioners, leaders out there to build a truly right and high performing go to market team that's actually going to deliver superior customer experiences for the long game, what's one thing that they could start doing and one thing that they should stop doing?
Yeah, so the start is you have to invest in the operating model, or in you can call it rev ops, you can call it sales ops, you can call it training enablement, whatever you call it. You have to build that function in a highly disciplined way in alignment with finance, because the only way to do it with intention is to make sure that the revenue model that finance wants and that the executives are presenting to the board is in alignment with how the operations will run. And when you have a revenue operating model that's congruent, and you're building for skill and you're building for progression of that skill through a company, you'll win. So that's what you have to start doing, and it applies. It's age appropriate. Small company, you don't need that much. Big company, you're redoing a lot of things, but it's vital. And then the stop is stop over hiring quota carriers without that first piece in place, because you'll self-destruct. You may get some revenue, but it's just going to churn. You're going to have a crappy customer experience, and your company will be cannibalized without question. The reason I can tell you that is almost every customer we face went through it, from mid 2015 on, where they were hiring at all costs, and they overhired and under-supported with an infrastructure to make it repeatable, and then they fired everybody. Yeah. And now many of them are getting acquired by private equity, and the problem is they have extremely high CAC, or reverse CAC. They are spending massive amounts of money to land new customers, and they can't even keep them, and it's broken. So you got to figure out the balance very early in order to scale a company.
Ladies and gentlemen, words of wisdom from my friend Bart Fanelli. If you don't learn from history, you are doomed to repeat it. And here we are yet again. But all leaders need help, and that's why people like Bart exist. Bart, how can people best get in touch with you?
So Bart at Skillibrium.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn, and happy to collaborate, talk, share, and learn. I think that's part of business. Let's figure out how to win together and grow together, and that's what we do. So
fabulous. Well, I'm a huge fan. I love what you and your team are doing over there at Skillibrium, and I'm super excited to see the impact that you're going to have on leaders and teams and cultures and financial performance. I think in this crazy banny time that we're all operating in, having a guiding light is just really important, and I wish you and the team well. I know we're going to see a lot of great things to come. Thanks for being on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate the collaboration, and I look forward to more. So thanks, James.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Bye.